Today we discuss about IP address. What is IP address? You know, IP means Internet Protocol. IP address means Internet Protocol address. There are number of computers or number of mobile phones or number of other devices are connected to the Internet. Then how we send the data from one device to another? Using the IP address, we can send the data from one device to another. Each device that connects to the internet need a unique address, a unique identifying number. That identifying number is used for communication. This identifying number, which is called IP address. IP stands for Internet Protocol Address. There are a number of devices are connected to the internet. Each device have an address. This address is like this: 192.68.22.00. This is an address of this computer. This 10.11.224.36. This is an address of this mobile phone. All these numbers are unique number. This number is called IP address. Every mission on the network has a unique identifier. Like you have an address for your communication. When you send a letter using the post office, the postman, how they recognize this letter is your letter? The postman first writes the address. Using this address, he gives the letter to you. Similar way, this IP address work. IP address, there are two different versions of IP address. To standard for IP address, these are IP version 4 and IP version 6. IP version 4 we denote it as IPv4 and IP version 6 is denoted as IPv6. Simply we can tell there are two types of IP address, IPv4 and IPv6. Then first we learn about the IPv4. What is IPv4? IPv4 is a 32 binary bits. IPv4 use 32 binary bits. What is binary bit? Binary bit means it is 0 or 1. IPv4 use 32 binary bits means an IPv4 address have either 32 0 or 32 1 or combination of 32 zeros or ones. I think you get the idea. And IPv4 address is expressed by 4 numbers separated by dots. The second point, IPv4 address is expressed by 4 numbers. These 4 numbers are separated by dots. Each number is in decimal representation. Each number is in decimal representation. For example, this is an IPv4 address 260.27.61.137. This is an IPv4 address. Here, this is our 4 numbers. This first one, 216 is a number, 27 is a number, 61 is a number, and 137 is a number. These numbers are separated by a dot. That is, IPv4 address is expressed by 4 numbers. They are separated by dots. These numbers are base 10. 216 is a base 10 number. 27 is a base 10 number. 61 is a base 10 number. Base 10 means or decimal means a number system which use 0 to 9, which is called decimal number system. Here is an example. This is an IPv4 address. Here number of bit is 32 bits. 10 10 11 00 00 1000 dot 111110. This is total zeros or 1, which is 32. That is IPv4 is a 32 bits. This 32 bit is grouped as 8-bit numbers 10, 10, 110. It is 8 bit. 8 into 4, that is 32 bits. This 8 bits which is represented in decimal 172. This number which is represented decimal 16. This 0 is represented in decimal 254. Then this number which is represented in decimal, that's 1. That means IPv4 use 32-bit binary bit. IPv4 address is 4 numbers separated by dots. Each number is decimal representation for 8-digit binary number. 8-digit binary number. This 8-digit binary number we can call octant. This octant is represented in decimal form. These are the main characters of IPv4 address. I think you get the basic idea about IPv4. Another example, this is the first octant, 8-bit, which is first octant. This is second octant. This is third octant. This is fourth octant. The octants are represented in decimal form. Then form an address which is called IPv4 address. Then next, which is IPv6. First we think about why we use IPv6. IPv4, there are only 232 possible combinations, which offers just under 4.3 billion unique addresses. Then number of internet users are growing. Then we need more address. Thus we use IPv6. IPv6 we use because more number of internet users are increasing day by day. Thus we use IPv6. IPv6 use 128 binary bits to create a single unique address. IPv4 use 32 bits, but IPv6 which use 128 bits. This is the first main difference between IPv4 and IPv6. IPv4 which use 32 bits and IPv6 which use 128 bits. IPv6 address expressed by 8 group of hexadecimal number separated by colon. In case of IPv4 which represent the IPv4 address in decimal format which is separated by dots. Here IPv6 use hexadecimal number system for representation and separated by a colon. Here is an example. This is an example of IPv6 address. These numbers are separated by a colon. Here is another example. Our main characters of IPv6 address is 128 bits. It is 8 field of 16 bits. Is separated by colon. It uses hexadecimal number system. Here is an example. Here 20001 colon ODBH colon. This is an address, IPv6 address. This 2001 which is represented in binary format here. Then here is another example. You get the correct idea. IPv6 which use 128 bit. 128 8 field of 16 bit. 8 field of 16 bit. The example 8 field 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 8 field of 16 bit. Each field have 16 bit 0 0 1 0 0 0 0. This is 16 bit. This 16 bit which is represented in 2001. another 16 bit which is represented by 0dbh. This way an IPv6 addressing is done. Then how you know your IP address? To know your IP address, I already tell your mobile have an IP address, your computer have an IP address. Here is some website which show your IP address. The first website is www.whatismyip.com. This website give your IP address. Another website which is whatismyipaddress.com. Otherwise, in command prompt in Windows, we can use ipconfig/on. This command also show the IP address. Then under classifications of IP address, there are different types of IP address, which is private IP address and public IP address, and a static IP address and a dynamic IP address. Then first is private IP address. Private IP address is the address of your device connected on your home or business network. A private IP address are not unique because they are limited number of devices on your network. That means private IP address means when you connect a local area network, we need an IP address for that communication. That purpose we use an IP address. That IP address we can call it is private IP address. In Windows, ipconfig command is used to see or match the IP address or private IP address. Then another which is public IP address. Our public IP address is the main IP address to which your home or business network is connected to the internet. When you connect to the internet, we need an IP address. That IP address which is called public IP address. This public IP address can be seen by using this website www.whatismyip.com. This site provides your public IP address. Then another which is static IP address and dynamic IP address. All private and public IP address can either static or dynamic. A static IP address is simply an address that does not change. Static means permanent. It is permanent IP address. Once your device is assigned to a static IP address, the number typically stay the same until the device is decommissioned or your network architecture is changed. This permanent IP address we use, which is called a static IP address. Another which is dynamic IP address. Dynamic IP address configure automatically and assign an IP to your network when you set up an internet connection. When you take an internet connection, when you connection with an internet, we get an IP address. That IP address is not permanent. That IP address is called a dynamic IP address. The distribution of who distribute the dynamic IP address? Distribution of IP address is managed by Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, that is DHCP protocol. Using this DHCP protocol, you get the dynamic IP address. This dynamic IP address is activate for a limited time. When you cut off your internet connection, this dynamic IP address expires. When you again take an internet connection, you get another dynamic IP address. The first IP address and the second IP address both are not same. They are dynamic, that is changed. Then when you connect to the internet, his pictures show when you connect to the internet, Then the internet service provider assign an IP address. This IP address is called a dynamic IP address. Using this IP address, you can use the internet, or you can send the message, you can see some visuals, we can visit some website using this IP address. Then what is the static and dynamic IP address? Static IP address means it is permanent. Then dynamic address means it is not permanent. Who provide the dynamic IP address? The DHCP server, which provide the dynamic IP address. This green color shows the dynamic IP address, and this color shows the address never changed, that is static IP address. A server have an address which is IP address, which is static IP address. A web server have an address which is static IP address. Then internet service provider have an address which is static IP address. And our local network have an IP address which is dynamic IP address. I think you get the basic idea about internet, IP address, and different types of IP address, static IP address, dynamic IP address, and IPv4 and IPv6. Thank you.